Hi, BookTube, and welcome to another non-fiction review. I haven't spoken about this very often, but for 20 years, between 1978 and 1999, I was a conservative variety of Christian. I attended a church which was considered a cult. Speaking personally, there were not many gains from that time, but there was one small benefit to me as a student of English literature. And that was that I got to know the Bible very, very well. As a church member, I was expected to be reading it daily. And though I left that church and I've been an agnostic for the whole of the 21st century, I continue to use and benefit from the Bible as a piece of literature. In university, that knowledge informed my studies because the English Bible and Christianity are, what's the best way to put it? Like, archetypal backdrops to English culture and English writing. But if you've never read the Bible before, where do you start getting a grasp of what it is? A safe grasp, right? I would not recommend becoming a conservative evangelical, right? That's the hard way, okay? In this review, what I'd love to do is introduce you to a former bishop who also left his church. And you could say that his speciality is bringing an informed but agenda-free approach to matters biblical. Today, we are going to be looking at The Good Book by Richard Holloway, published by Granta in 2006, and the ISBN number is for the paperback edition of the book. Let's summarize. This book is going to be different things to different readers. If you are someone who has a great interest or even a reasonable grounding academically in biblical scholarship theology, you might want to read this book just to evaluate the author's choices and the construction of the presentation, because this is a very short work. It is not a comprehensive one, and it's not written for an academic audience. If, like me, you had a conservative Christian background, this is going to be a tidy introduction to the doubts that scholars have about the attribution and the dating of canonical books. And if you have only seen or used the word canon in connection with your Star Trek fan-based Discord group, and you just know the Bible is that book that Christians have, but you're curious and you don't want to start talking to anybody who might try and convert you, then I say Richard Holloway's a safe starting point. This book also needs to be understood in context. It was originally titled How to Read the Bible, and it was one in a series of 18 how to read books produced by Granta and W.W. Norton, and was edited by the English philosopher Simon Critchley. You'll find a link in my description box to an article in the Marginalian that talks about the series as a whole. It has a lot of little short books that are introductory works to all of Europe's great thinkers, as well as the Bible, the Quran, and the Egyptian Book of the Dead. So what do we know about Richard Holloway? There's not a great deal online. We know that he was born in 1933 in Glasgow, but he grew up in Alexandria, which is a town about 15 miles to the northwest. His father had a job in the local dye works. Richard did not grow up in, as you can imagine, in a very wealthy home, therefore. He left home at age 14 to train for the priesthood in England. And then from 1958 to 1986, he served as a curate and a vicar and a rector in various churches in England, Scotland, and in the United States. He was ordained Bishop of Edinburgh in 1986, and he served until the year 2000, when he took the decision to resign because of considerable reaction within the church against his 1999 book, Godless Morality. He was well known before and since as a supporter for progressive causes. He is the patron of the LGBT Youth Scotland, and until 2018, he served on the board of Systema Scotland, which runs various charities to aid children from financially deprived areas. I counted 42 different books that he has published, but was not able to find a definitive list when I recorded this review. He has written for several UK newspapers. Holloway currently lives in Edinburgh, and his latest collection of essays, On Reflection, will be brought out by Canongate Press this August. Let's talk about how this book is structured. It's a very small book, as I've said before. It's only 147 pages. And if you consider the paratextual material at the beginning of the book, which is about 10% of it, and at the end, which is about 25%, I figure you're actually left with about 100 pages of text. Now, that 100 pages is divided into 10 chapters. 5 of them are written about the Hebrew scriptures, or what we also call the Old Testament, and another 5 written about the Greek Aramaic books, which make up what we call the New Testament. This is my summary here that I'm going to put up now of those chapter contents. So chapter 1, Genesis and the beginnings of human religion. 2, Exodus showing a remote God using human mediators. 3, Deuteronomy and law as social connection. 4, Hebrew scripture and the history of Israel. 5, why Job is the worst book for anyone suffering. That chapter is worth it all by itself, actually. I'd buy the book just for that chapter. I wish someone had said that to me ages back. Anyway, chapter 6, the Gospels, not history remembered, but prophecy historicized. 7, the Gospels, Jesus as prophet challenging institutional excess. 8, the Good Samaritan, compassion to reestablish social connection. 9, the Apostle Paul, the reason we have a modern Bible. And chapter 10, Revelation and the politics of apocalyptic thinking. There. I'm hoping that whets your appetite. Holloway also does something really different at the back of his book. He could just do a standard bibliography or just list all the books that he's written, but he takes the assumption that you are still feeling very new and raw to the subject. You would like to study more, but you don't even know the first step now. So what he does is he starts out by recommending a more comprehensive handbook of the Bible, something a little bit thicker and that goes more into depth. Then he also advises the reader who really is interested to think about purchasing a commentary, and he recommends about 5 or 6 of those. And then he goes into what I'd call a normal bibliography. Even after the bibliography, he makes a few more recommendations for people who are particularly interested about the Jesus Seminar, and I'll say more about that a little further on in the review. So we'll do the mundane things now. How did I get this book? How much did it cost? Why did I choose to read it? Actually, I haven't recorded how much I paid for it, but I don't think it was very expensive. I do feel like something like $5.99 is coming to mind. And I bought the Kindle version, and I bought it 2 days before my Read What You Own challenge began. Yeah, I did what everybody did. You know, you do a little splurge just before you have to knuckle down and be disciplined. But why did I buy it? That's the interesting thing. At the time, at the end of October, I was reading The Madness of Grief by the Reverend Richard Coles, and I found out that the Reverend Richard Coles, his late husband, he grew up and attended the same church that I went to, and that must have sent my mind reeling back to those days in the late 1990s when I was also thinking of leaving the church. Richard Coles' husband did leave the church. He joined the Church of England, but he left my more right-wing organization. And so I must have gone looking for writers and books, anything that reminded me of the time in the late 90s when I was questioning my faith, when I was breaking away, when I was wanting not to be Christian anymore. And I found this book, which is the one that got Richard Holloway in trouble, Godless Morality. But for me, it was really helpful because I still felt that I wanted to be a good person, but I knew I couldn't do it with belief. I knew that wasn't going to happen. I knew that I just didn't have that in me. So it was a great way to go forward. I felt it was really, really helpful. It amazed me that Holloway could be such an educated man, a man who'd spent longer in any kind of organized religion than I had, and yet he'd found a way forward. So it gave me hope of doing the same. Right, did I find anything unexpected or interesting about this book? Well, I did promise that I would talk about the Jesus Seminar, but maybe rather than me talk about it, so you can get a feel for Richard Holloway's style and, if you need it, be reassured about his theological position. I'm going to quote from his introduction. He says, "One influential group of radical New Testament scholars in the USA, the Jesus Seminar, actually uses a color-coded voting system when authenticating text. When they vote on a text, they ask their members to drop a colored bead into a box according to the following system. A red bead means Jesus undoubtedly said this or something very like it. A pink bead means Jesus probably said something like this. A gray bead means Jesus did not say this, but the ideas contained in it are close to his own. A black bead means Jesus did not say this. It represents the perspective or content of a later or different tradition." And then he goes on to describe, sorry, I'm interjecting here. Richard Holloway goes on to describe the translation of the Gospels that the Jesus Seminar came out with, where what they did was they took the colored bead system and they literally colored the different verses in the Gospels to show what the scholars voted as being correct text, etc., the different colors. So if I go on to read, it says, if you comb through the translation these scholars made of the first 3 Gospels, note 3, you see a pattern of red, pink, and gray on every page against a predominant background of black. But when you turn to their translation of the 4th Gospel, the one attributed to John, the text is an unrelieved black. The verdict on the inauthenticity of John reflects a significant consensus among many, although not far from all, he says, far from all scholars, that the 4th Gospel is a creation of the early church and represents a significant theological development in the Christian understanding of the status of Jesus. In other words, though Jesus did not claim to be divine, his followers made the claim on his behalf after years of meditation on his continuing impact in their lives. Obviously, these are deep theological waters into which few amateurs will wish to plunge, but they should alert readers to the developmental complexities of the New Testament. Is there anything else that readers should be prepared for if they're going to take on this book? Well, I think Holloway holds the position that the Bible is not the directly inspired dictation from God, and he questions many traditional Christian beliefs, including, as you have now witnessed, the divinity of Jesus. That and the fact that the book assumes no prior knowledge of the Bible, he's defining the expected reading audience. They're going to be curious, but mainly non-Christian. And also, Holloway mentions the Apocrypha just enough for readers to understand that the early Christian writing was diverse, and that canonization was this act of political consolidation necessary for the church to become the religion of the Roman Empire. Now, I'm no expert in the Apocrypha, but we have at least one BookTube creator who, well, I don't know if he wants to call himself an expert, but I know he's read a lot. And I humbly ask him, please would you fill my comment box with a recommendation for the best book, or books if you feel that more than one, if people should have a choice, that somebody very new to the subject could get an introduction to the books that were left out of the Christian canon. Finally, any recommendations for related or follow-up reading? My experience is that ex-Christians attract other ex-Christians. I'm going to mention a couple of other radical writers. If you stayed this far in the review, then probably you are ex-Christian, or at least curious about what is all this. So I'm going to give you a couple of writers that really helped me in my spiritual transition. My recommendations are these. The Christian Agnostic by Leslie D. Weatherhead. That one's out of print, by the way, so you're going to have to go finding secondhand copies. And then The Battle for God by Karen Armstrong, or really anything by Karen Armstrong. If you're looking for an account of someone who moved beyond their religious faith, then I recommend her memoir, The Spiral Staircase. Well, BookTube, this review is done, but you can look forward to another Middlemarch meditation at the weekend. And after that, a fiction review of Candice Carty-Williams' British Book Award-winning novel, which has been adapted for television in the UK, and it's going to be airing on Channel 4 this June. Very excited about that. And my fiction bookmark has moved and is now inside the covers of Shehan Karunatalaka's novel, The Seven Moons of Mali Almeida, which was the 2022 Booker Prize winner. It's all go here. I hope your reading month is also off to a flying start. So I'll see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.